Ooh. Oh, that's loud.
Boy, that's loud.
That is loud.
Boy, that's loud. Yeah, grab a coaster. Have some. I'm the sweaty Yeti.
I was a little sweaty Eddie last night. He cried twice.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, you nerds. It's From Behind the Barcast, the podcast for bartending, service industry, drinking in general. I am Paxton Quigley. We have Clint Moses over here. And if you're just listening, and I don't know if you can hear it over the microphone, we have a little bit of a different setup because we have a very special episode.
I'm not shocked anymore. Every time it changes, I'm like, okay, yes.
So in a little bit, we're going to interview Miss Barbara Sloan. She wrote a book called Tipped. The Life-Changing Guide to Financial Freedom for Waitresses and Service Industry Professionals, but more on that in a little bit.
Available on Amazon?
Available on Amazon. We're going to find the link and put it down in the description of the YouTube video and of the Apple podcast. I don't know about Spotify. I think it will show up on there, but
yeah, it will.
We'll put all the links everywhere so that you can find them. So we're in a little bit of a thing today. We're really close to each other.
A little too close.
Clint's really close to death.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow's the Huckapoo's Christmas party, so we're taking her real easy tonight.
Real easy.
But, yeah.
We don't know what tomorrow has in store for us.
Yeah.
We just know it's going to be physically daunting, probably.
Physical in the morning, and then emotional in the evening.
Formal in the evening.
Yeah, we're doing a little prom thing, so it should be a good time. We're going to dress up. But I think they were smart by getting the games out of the way early in the day. Because typically when we play our games at the Christmas party, we're already half lit, and no one participates that well. It's not very athletic.
The longer it goes on, like we had to shorten the wheelbarrow race last year because it was like that first one was way too far and like way too treacherous terrain too. We're like going over, like wheels are falling off.
Literally
wheels are falling off.
I went to burnout. My quadriceps.
Oh yeah.
Goodbye with the wheelbarrow race because my buddy Pat Burns was. We're just as heavy as each other.
Yeah,
and we had to wheelbarrow each other. We ended up winning, but good God. I went to failure.
Cost?
At what
cost?
I went to failure. So we have a new patron.
Yes. Thank you, John Benson.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
We love this. We love our patrons.
Shout out to Josh for coming to comment on a Patreon thing this week.
Oh, nice.
Last week's Patreon, if you haven't heard it, it's quite revealing.
It's quite revealing. And actually, to speak of that, my roommate said one of our Patreon's supporters was like, we were supposed to hear where you started working now. And I was like, oh, I think we didn't mention it because you have an NDA.
Yes. It's on the Patreon. I think they're not talking about it then. No, I will tell you if you see me.
Yeah. Just come talk to Clint personally.
Wherever you can find me.
Yeah. But you know what our patrons are not?
Oh, shit. It's the Karen of the week. It's the Karen of the week.
Oh, shit. So what we're doing is getting all of our little bit of content out of the way first so that we can make way for the interview here in a little bit.
Behind the scenes here.
Yeah. I can switch.
There you go.
So do you have a Karen of the week?
Yeah. I do.
High energy here, baby.
And this is like a typical Karen thing that doesn't happen often, but it does happen sometimes. Okay, you're at the grocery store. There's self-checkout. If both sides of the Kroger on Wilmington Island has like a ton of self-checkout things. However, sometimes one side is closed at 6 p.m. for some reason on a Tuesday night when a lot of people are shopping. It's prime shopping time. I get in line. There is 12 people waiting to get to self-checkout. To my right, I see this couple with a 5-year-old kid, and they have way too many things in their basket. Like, they're at like 50 items, and they're letting him scan each one.
The 5-year-old child?
The 5-year-old child.
Could it even reach the scanner?
This kid was not going places. Like, he's not going to be an astronaut.
What, you're saying he's going to end up working there?
If he's lucky. He's lucky. But it was so slow. I'm like, why? Like, why are you, like, I get you want your kid to build skills in life and you want them to learn things. However, you also could teach them that it's polite to move things along faster and let somebody who's, say, better at something do it in order to help others get through their evening as well.
Well, learning how to read the room, that there's might be people, like teaching them self-awareness that there are people waiting around you.
Yes.
And also, you can teach that kid that skill
Another time.
at a different time. Maybe not at the highest volume part.
And they weren't helping him with anything. Like they weren't putting stuff in the bags. They weren't handing him items. He was doing all of it. And like everybody in line's kind of looking at each other like, God damn.
So you had some camaraderie within the other people waiting, like, are you serious right now? Yeah.
Yes. Pretty much everybody that interacted with this was like, what the hell is going on here?
So lesson of the day, have a little self-awareness or just situational awareness.
Teaching your children situational awareness is important. They'll help them in life more than them knowing how to scan checkout items. Unless that's as far as you think they're going to go, then maybe that's what you needed to do. But he's 5. He has time to learn.
Yes, there's plenty of time to learn.
Plenty of time to learn. Perhaps at a more reasonable hour.
So I'll tell you what I learned at the city council meeting and my Karen.
Oh, here you
Let's
go.
flip it. Let's switch it over. I know you're hot in there, baby.
Oh, maybe. I can't decide if I'm hot or not.
Peeling back the layers here. All right.
Yeah.
So
Karen Quigley.
Karen Quigley here, writing a Yelp review. So I was at the city council meeting this last week, and my girlfriend Allie, she is a shorebird biologist. She's a legitimate scientist. And on the docket was something called Wagging Wednesdays, where they were proposing to put dogs on the beach for one day a week, or giving them a pass to have dogs on the beach one day a week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right. So I'm not against dogs on the beach, but they're approaching it the wrong way. So my girlfriend goes there because she does a bird survey each week on these beaches down here, and she knows how many of every single species of shorebird and seabird are there. She's got, I don't know, hard factual data, which migratory patterns. She does this every week. So I think that there's a way to have dogs on the beach where you map out one specific part of the beach that you can take the dogs on that'll have the least environmental impact on turtles, birds.
Exactly.
Buy a sticker that gives you a year-long pass.
I like that idea. You get a pass, and then you
that can pay for the
high fines for leaving poop on the beach or your dog doing anything destructive, and it should be on a leash. I know it'd be great to let your dog run free on the beach. I have a dog. I'd like to let him run free on the beach. Unfortunately, it's not reasonable. Some people are scared of dogs, and you can't. Sometimes your dog finds something it wants. You can't stop it fast enough. So
not without a leash.
Not without a leash. So if it's digging in the, in the turtle bed, you should get in a lot of trouble.
Guess what smells great to dogs? Little turtle legs.
Yeah, and you don't want to punish the dog. You want to punish the owner.
Yeah.
It's not the dog's fault. It's got a bad owner, like when a bad kid.
Yeah.
It's not the kid's fault. It's the parent's fault.
Yeah. So at any point, these dogs could. Well, one of the major arguments, I think, is how are you going to enforce people cleaning up their dog's shit? Because there are rednecks that go down there every year and leave very visible styrofoam coolers, cans of beer, chip bags, Gatorade bottles on the beach, and that's not enforced. Them picking up their own litter.
Yeah, and it's hard to. It's a big beach. It's hard to enforce that. But
imagine trying to enforce dog shit.
That is little. Does he have a little dog like those little tiny turds? What do you know?
So there is a way to do it. Well, anyway, so there's a Karen and a Darren, and guess what? They were married to each other. How cute!
Of course.
So first, so after Allie presents factual information, photos, all this stuff, Karen gets up and she really brought the hard-hitting data here. Karen did. Karen goes, I don't know where y'all got them pictures from. I was on the South End beach the other day and didn't see that many birds.
That's
hard statistical analysis right there.
I didn't see that many birds. Okay.
So then Karen sits down and it's Darren's turn. Now Darren comes up with like swagger. He's like, man, y'all just don't understand what I've been here for this many years. And his argument was, we've had the same birds here for 75 years.
What I mean, yes.
Also, hard statistical data. I was
think
like,
they may have, went through a life cycle.
Maybe a couple life cycles. I don't know. Maybe population numbers have risen or dropped.
Is he anti-bird? Does he want some of the birds to go away?
Well, that's the thing.
They shit on my car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we ought to run them all out.
One shit on my wife one time. I tried to shoot the damn thing.
He goes, well, they do it in St. Simon's. I was like, go to St. Simon's and see how it's conducted there. There's far less people for how much they have so much beach there. That it's barely, they don't concentrate all in one area.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Spread out more.
It's super spread out.
And
And
the King and Prince area is
Yeah.
pretty busy, but that it's pretty spread out.
so the argument, I was just like, oh, so this is they were sure that they had this thing in the bag. Well, they tabled it, so it's gonna,
And they don't do it year round too. I think the neck hit. Does Hilton Head do
oh,
it
I
too?
don't know. Well, he mentioned a couple other islands, and I was like, well, we'll move there because those islands suck when it comes to culture.
Right.
And he was like, well, what if he pretended that we were going to lose tourism business because
Of the thing we don't even have.
of a thing we don't already have. And he said, well, we used to have dogs on the beach 20 years ago or something like that. And I was like, I'm not even sure that's true.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, not in my lifetime,
Yeah.
because I remember
I'm 40. I'm a man.
my dad took my dog to the beach when I was young. I was like,
Yeah.
single digit age, and he got a ticket for it.
Yeah.
And that was like of all the dogs we had growing up was the worst behaved dog we had.
Right. Yeah. And you can, like I said, man, I'm not a dog. I love dogs. But if you can't enforce people picking up their own litter, how
are you going to enforce
do you
this?
expect? Now, if you had just a section of the beach where you paid a sticker, you paid for a sticker or a pass, whatever, and then with that pass, with the money that you paid for the pass, that could be spent on operating costs for having someone to
be
enforce.
there, yes.
And guess what that does? Create jobs.
Great job. And then you also know exactly who has their dog on the
Yeah.
beach.
Alex was telling me, co-host of the show, he said in certain places you can get a pass for your dog, but they have to DNA test it. You know why?
I don't.
Because they will test that poo-poo.
Oh, yeah. I heard about that. Yeah. They'll poop test it. Yeah. A DNA poop test.
Oh my God, this is so goddamn hot.
It's the worst.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a little life hack. Don't be like Karen and Darren. Do not let your 5-year-old kid do the self-checkout at Kroger. Oh my God. It looks like the Run to Jewels baby. Where did you get this baby from, baby?
That's the baby I won in the Snoot baby daddy or baby off.
If you're on Spotify, open your
Big
phone
Brother,
right now.
Best Big Brother contest is I won this creepy baby. Look at his eyes.
It's got dead eyes.
It doesn't have eyes. It is the
They're
creepiest
dead.
looking thing. It is so creepy. Like,
Oh. It's very off-putting, like that
I know,
Kanye mask.
it was
last
in the
week.
back seat of my car when I took my car to the shop, and I was like, "Oh man!" But they got in there like, "Whoa!"
Best
scared
way
you.
to scare the guys at the auto shop.
That's why I didn't want you to see it. I wanted it to be a surprise, and I was just gonna bring her out and let her sit here, and we're just gonna
Well, there we go.
gonna put this creepy baby right there.
All right, I'm very nervous now.
There you
So real quick, before we get to Miss Barbara Sloan and that interview, we just want to say RIP to Belinda Flanagan.
Yes.
She was a Tybee staple, owner of the Crab Shack.
I had a memorial service for her yesterday at the Crab
Yeah,
Shack.
beautiful lady. And so I grew up in that neighborhood with the Crab Shack, and my parents loved her.
Oh yeah. Everyone loves Belinda.
Yeah, and she was
Jack,
yeah, right.
not so much.
But she was always that presence in the community where it's like,
Yes.
she always had whatever her presence was, it was always like uplifting, and she was whip smart,
Yes.
and she did not let people F around or play a fool.
She did not.
And she did not suffer any fools.
No tomfoolery.
No tomfoolery here.
No.
So
tomfoolery.
yeah, we're just gonna we got Barbara coming in from New York City
get the rope.
over the Zoom call. So we'll see y'all in that segment. Au revoir. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to From Behind the Barcast. The book is called Tipped, the life-changing guide to financial freedom for waitresses, bartenders, strippers, and all over service industry professionals, or SIPs as they're called in the
I like
book.
the sip acronym.
I'm a simp for sips. Today, through the power of the internet, we have the author of this book, Barbara Sloan. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks guys for having me. I'm so excited to talk.
Yeah, I'm really glad you reached out to us because this is a segment of the industry or thought in the industry that a lot of people have, but they don't know how to navigate. And you, having been in the service industry and with the tribulations that you dealt with, sort of led to these ideas of how to better manage your personal self and money. So if you could take us through a little bit of your journey through the service industry.
Yeah, I'll start where I'm at now, and maybe we can go backwards a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit. When when people meet me today, they know me as somebody who owns a women-owned and operated construction company in the heart of Manhattan. But what they don't know is that I spent 20 years working in the service industry, almost completely in tandem, and sometimes instead of working service industry jobs. Um, so I got started in the industry. I guess my first industry job, I was a paper girl at the age of 11.
like
And so
bicycle.
well, it was right outside of Detroit. So no,
Okay.
bicycle wasn't a great area. But my mom would like help me load up her minivan with papers. And I had a couple blocks where I would deliver papers. And I remember around the holidays just getting a boatload of cash. And like that was like ones and fives. And I was so rich with tips. And then when I turned 16, I got a couple other jobs that, were loosely around the industry, and I experienced tipping as a practice, and I kind of fell in love with that. And then when I was 19, my dad passed away, and I ended up buying the house that I grew up in for twice the price, because they had sold it, and I wanted to own it. I was not ready to let that go. And so I took out this was 2000 or 2005. I took out a mortgage. I took out 10 credit cards. I maxed out 10 credit cards
Wow.
to renovate the house myself, and just got myself in a really bad financial situation. And after a year of renovating this house, I had worked through my grief. But life felt really overwhelming and hard. And, what I'd realized when I had lost a parent at that young age was just that it didn't need to be that hard. And I needed something more fun and more easy. So I sold the house. I dodged a bunch of creditors and I moved to California. I started responding to Craigslist ads for like catering jobs and looking into restaurants and bars and clubs. And that's sort of like where my full time experience in the industry got started. I worked in California for a couple of years, and then I moved to Las Vegas. From Las Vegas, I moved to Boston, back to Michigan, Boston. I moved around the country a lot. So I worked in a lot of states in the service
And
industry.
that's a good industry to be able to bounce around like that because you can find a job basically anywhere.
Yeah, it's the greatest part of this industry is like the flexibility and the fact that you are location independent. You can take this mastery in these careers and kind of go anywhere you want. I think it's one of the appeals.
And it's transmissible not only to other service industry jobs, but you're dealing with the public and your acumen at dealing with people's personalities. And
Oh, yeah.
so that can translate into, other industries.
So what part of the industry were you in all these various locations?
Oh man, I was a cater waiter. I was a sideshow showgirl. I was a pole dancer. I was a burlesque dancer. I was a flair bartender in Vegas. I was, you name it. If it involved tips, I did it. A lot of serving, a lot of bartending, a lot of dancing.
And as you went from place to place, was there ever, so as I was reading the book, it was taking me through a roller coaster of emotions. I was like,
Yes.
hey, you know what? Why am I in the service industry job when I could have the comfort of the 401k and the health insurance at a 9 to 5? And then the very next second, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to wake up every day and have to go work for someone just to get those benefits. And I'm like, I make my own schedule. Then I'm like, but making my own schedule, I'm not putting aside anything in case I get hurt or anything like that. Was it the same sort of ride for you in those terms?
I mean, I think I got into it because it was a fun industry and I really liked connecting with people and talking to people. And, it just felt fun and easy. And at the time, I needed fun and easy.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And as time went on, what would you say was sort of the culmination of deciding that it was time to take a little more ownership over your finances and your health and well-being in terms of the service industry and how you started your construction business, sort of in tandem?
Yeah, 2013 was a very important year for all of this. I moved to New York City with my wife. We had $700 in our bank account. We moved here and I got two jobs. I started bartending at Coyote Ugly, And if people don't know what Coyote Ugly is, it's a bar where you sing and dance on top of the bar. You beat your patrons. It's a good time. Check it out.
We have an equivalent, or we did have an equivalent here in Savannah. Actually, I was going to mention that because you mentioned it in the book. It was called 309 West, and it was basically a ripoff of Coyote Ugly. So yeah.
Oh yeah, you get girls to take their bras off. It's a blast. So I got that job, and I also got a day job working on Wall Street, and I was working in an unregulated market. So think it was part trading floor and part independent sales organization, which was selling like usurious loan products. So it was like loan sharking. And it was gross. It was really, really gross seeing that side of financial services, and so, sort of like how all of the predatory nature of financial services came about. So
like the payday loan thing. Yeah. I know.
Payday loans. Yeah. Like very usurious rates, just schemy, scammy, terrible, terrible things. After our third trader got shipped off to rehab, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I want to be in finance. I want to go back to the safety of bars and construction because this was too toxic for me.
Wow.
Which I never thought I would say. So I went and got a job at the company that I am now an owner of, or I went and got a job, as an employee of the company that I now own. I was employee number 3. And what I was tasked to do there was set up an HR department because they were growing, and to do the finance and accounting for the company. And HR was something I had never experienced before. I had never had HR. I didn't know what a 401k was. I had had health insurance maybe once in the last like 12 years. So I didn't know what PTO policy was. I didn't know what any of these benefits were. And so I started like deep diving them, figuring out how they support the health and well-being of an employee. And then on the other side, this company worked with really, really high net worth clients. So they worked with really, really wealthy people. And we got to have conversations with them about their budgets and how they thought about money. And that was sort of the aha moment for me where I was like, oh, it's these benefits and these financial pillars and mindset ways that kept me and all of my peers from building wealth, right? Because people in the service industry don't have access to these benefits. We don't have access to people in financial services unless it's in a very predatory way. And so we missed a lot of this financial literacy and this financial education. And so it was like those moments where I was like, okay, this is a huge gap in my knowledge and in my peers' knowledge.
And now it's time for me to extend and gain that knowledge for myself, because the barrier to entry when you're in the service industry like that, like you said, none of your peers are privy to most of those things. And it doesn't behoove the people who are over you, like your bosses, to make you privy to those things, because that in turn might end up affecting their bottom line in some sort of way.
I've worked at a Ruth's Chris for a couple of years and a Chart House. So those were big corporate restaurants. So like Chart House was part of Landry. So it's like the second largest restaurant corporation company in the country. So they offered some of those things, but they just glazed right over that when you were doing your, intro and stuff. The Ruth's Chris, I opened the restaurant. So we actually had like a day where we talked about those things and those options, which were nice, but I was 28 at the time. It was like, I'm just going to make $500 a day.
I just want to get on my shift and make that cash really quick.
Exactly.
We'll move on into a little more of that subject in a second.
Yeah, so like restaurants like that offer you a ton of opportunity, but they don't drive it home to you really, because that doesn't behoove them. And that was like my last experience with a place that had HR and offered benefits. Everywhere else I've worked has been independently owned.
Yeah, 95% of restaurants are owned by small operators. And, we know this industry, it has small margins. It's a difficult industry to run. It's not like the owners of these businesses don't want to provide us benefits. It's often that it's just not financially possible to support the overhead of an independent HR person, or the overhead of managing all of the compliance that's required to manage these benefits.
Yeah, because I didn't even think about it. That's a staffing thing as well. It's not just offering. You have to have someone with the acumen to run that part of the business for you.
Yeah, I can get this eventually, but I'm in between jobs right now. I start a new job tomorrow, and the company I'm going to work for has 7 or 8 companies or businesses, and they're buying more and getting to a point where they've got they've got a lot of capital, and that's a big attraction right now. Because I'm coming from a place that had one restaurant, they opened a second, which they sunk millions of dollars into, and then the pandemic hit after a year of them being open, and that hit them pretty hard. And so they are incredibly frugal at this point, and that was a cause of stress for me. I mean, it stresses you out when your job can't provide you things you need to do your job, and there's little things broken all day long. I mean, our sink was sideways like this for like almost 6 months now, and like, oh, we're gonna do it. Someone's gonna do this, and we'll do that. I'm like, but
we're gonna fix it as soon as we give you health care.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, our federal minimum wage is $2.13. It's no surprise that we're not receiving any benefits as well, right? And I think that was also a big part of my drive to write this book, is that like at the end of the day, yes, we want to encourage like state, federal corporations to change things, but we have to start with what we can do for ourselves. We have to protect ourselves.
The other it's kind of on us to make that first step, because no one's going to go outside of themselves to do it for you.
Exactly. And the other industry that I worked in as long as the service industry, which was construction, and in construction, there's an organization called OSHA, which it's how that organization got started was they were going to like reduce workplace injuries and deaths. But they started by educating the workforce, and they changed the entire industry from within. And so that was my mission. I was like, all right, well, I spent 8 years teaching myself all of these things, learning about all of these benefits, learning about the pillars of personal finance, learning about, the stock market, learning about all of these things that make up a financial wellness for a person. And I was like, I need to bring this to people because we have to change it from within.
And this was informed by you joining the company you own now. When you first joined it as an employee, that was the eye-opening thing to how it could be ran or conducted.
Yeah. And then I guess also in 2016, the political landscape was a lot. I was like, I can't watch the news. This is a whole mess. Yeah. And so I started deep diving personal finance podcasts, and show after show, I would hours and hours and hours of podcasts. I would never hear anyone who looked like us. I never heard a single example of somebody who built their career in the service industry coming on and talking about how they got wealthy, how they built wealth, how they protected themselves financially. And I was just like, nobody's talking to this entire industry. And the service industry is the largest U.S. private sector employer in the United States. There's over 5.5 million people who work on a tip-based income in the United States. Yeah. This is not a small industry.
Yeah, and it's a very underserved industry in terms of understanding financial freedom and viability and outside of the workplace to keep. And not only that, but the mental health side of it that no one actually talks about.
You mentioned that in around 2016, you took a year off of social media, took a full break, and just didn't. And like, that's so important to do at times, just because you get up, you have your routine, and you're like, oh, what's happening with this? And I was doom scrolling in 2016, and you were feeding ourselves a lot of negative energy, and that sucks because then it bleeds into your psyche, and then you're feeling bad about something you really have no control over. And
what you have control over, which you talked about in the book, is the people that ask, when's that real job coming? When are you going to do this? And you said doing the self-deprecating thing, which I would do a lot. That really struck me. I'd be like, oh, just waiting on the lottery, even though I don't play the fucking lottery, whatever. But it was always something like, but now after reading the book in those terms, I was like, the next person that does have the gall to ask me something like that, I'm going to be like, well, I'm not going to be worried about what you're doing. But you were absolutely right in the sense of the more you self-deprecate, the more you minimize, the more it starts to affect your psyche.
Yeah. I hate and love this question, the what's your real job question, because I think it's so much deeper than just that question, right? Like, and that's the reason I love it. I mostly hate it because the people who are asking it are poor-mannered pricks. But what's behind that question is they want to know how you get to do this for a living. They want to know how you get to have this job because they chased different things that they were told that they needed. And those things don't come with your job. And they want to know how you make it work. It comes from a place of jealousy and maybe a little bit of concern. And then on the other side, when we hear that, what we aren't hearing is the concern in that question. We aren't hearing them say, what about these other benefits that are actually financial safety nets that I have been told that I need? And in a lot of ways, they're not wrong, right? We do need those safety nets.
But I think on a majority, and not to poo-poo anyone who does have any actual concern, but on a majority basis, it's them trying to be diminutive. Number one, because of the jealousy thing. Number two, they are fine with having you be their sounding board for every one of their little problems. But as soon as it turns in the other way and they want to view you as something lesser than, they want you when they want you.
Yep, and then they don't when they don't. And that's
Yep.
like when family asks, "Hey, when are you going to get a real job?" That's from a point of concern. But it got to the point, and I did this at my last job. People would ask about other things, and I would figure out if they were local, if they were tourists. I'm not going to most likely not going to ever see them again. And I got to where to avoid that, I would lie to people and tell them I was teaching. And they'd go, "What are you teaching?" I just statistics, something that no one's else going to be involved in, just to get away from that. Just to like, okay, look, I have another job, even though I don't, because I mean, I explore teaching, but that's not what I do on the side. I have other gigs. They don't want to hear that. They want you to be like, "Oh, I'm going to do this until it means to an end." But I worked with a woman for the last 6 years that was a teacher 5 days a week and waited table 3 days a week because teaching doesn't provide enough money as well. So she had to do both jobs.
Our industry has terrible PR. We just have really bad PR. Another industry that had really bad PR is waste management. Like back in the day, people were like, "Oh, don't let your kids grow up to be a garbage man." But then those industries, they got benefits. They started paying really well. And now all of a sudden, there's no moral or ambition failure in going into waste management because like the money is there, the benefits are there. And I think that part of the reason that our industry has such negative PR is the fact that we don't have these benefits. We don't have these structures which protect us. And, it's the reason that the most economically disadvantaged people in our population are people who work in the service industry. And it's because it's not an income problem. You both know this. We don't have a problem earning money in this industry. It's that we don't know how to allocate those resources in a way that protect us in the future.
And the old school trope of as long as you're working, you're doing well sort of thing. That's sort of changed because now it's like, well, if you're working at a restaurant, then you're not doing very well sort of thing. But you just enlightened me to, it could be born out of the fact that they're like, well, we know you might earn a living, but you're not earning protection, health, all of those other things.
And we've got our industry has such a bad reputation that's often correct of us frivolously spending money outside of work, which you talked about in the book, which I've gotten to myself on for years. But people, like you said, you go to work and you go out after work and you're spending, this much money on a drink, which how much that drink actually cost. And you buy $12 for a glass of wine when that bottle cost $11. So it's cheaper to go home and drink.
Becoming the ultimate customer.
Yes,
is
that's
what
you said. Yeah.
become.
And it's such a big problem. And I've gotten to where I almost feel like a dick by this, but like I worked with a guy recently who was in his early 30s and he was coming in on his days off drinking. He was going out after every shift drinking. And I'm like, how? And he would complain about money at work. I'm like, well, maybe don't, I mean, you're putting some of that money up your nose and a lot of that money in the drinks at bars. And like, you're spending half your shift drinking. And like, I live from where I work to where I live is about a 15-minute drive either way. So I don't drink and drive home. When I used to work, you could have a glass of wine or a drink through the shift. And I would do, 2 cocktails max because I have to drive. So going out after work is a personal responsibility decision to not go and get a DUI.
Right.
I go to his bar. It's like my home base bar. And I probably go to maybe one other bar a month. And I only go out maybe once every 2 weeks. Football season, I go out a little more often for games and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But like I drive a car one way, leave it there, cab home, and then get somebody to give me a ride back to my car. So I'm sending one cab fare and then drinks that are relatively inexpensive comparatively to downtown Savannah where I do work. You go after work, you get in a cup you can't put most of your hand around because it's so small, and it's $10 when on Tybee you're getting a 16-ounce strong pour for $5, and 3 drinks on Tybee is equal to 6 drinks downtown. That adds up, and I wish more people understood that you don't have to go out and spend a ton of money to have a good time, but you don't have to do it every day either.
Yeah, and you get to it in the book, the pitfalls of those things. Was it a little bit that you saw it in yourself and you saw it in the people around you, and once you recognized it in the people around you, you're like, holy shit, this is something we're all kind of doing.
It both in myself and in my peers. We talked about how every job has hazards, and this is just one hazard of this job, is that in order to have community with the people that we work with, that's a big part of the industry, is going out after enjoying those cocktails. That's your bonding time. I think also a lot of us, we get energized from a shift. So when you're wrapping up a shift, you have a ton of energy. You just had all of these big rushes. Whereas a lot of people, they don't have that energy, wave in their job. And so it's easy for them to be like, all right, I'm just going to go home and have a glass of wine from a box and call it a day. Whereas us, we end our shifts with all of this energy that we want to burn. And so it's natural to like want to go talk about our shifts and connect with people that we really didn't have a chance to connect with during our shifts.
And looking forward to, because you know the reward of the social interaction with your people that happens afterward. You're buffing them glasses at the end of the shift. You're doing whatever. You have this thing like, I'm looking forward to this. And meanwhile, the day guy, the day gal, they're kind of, in the same monotone all day. So they get off, they can wind down pretty easy. Me, I'm not going to bed for 3 hours.
And that's something we all dealt with in the industry. People being like, why aren't you up at 8 o'clock in the morning? It's like, if I'm at work until 11:30, I can't just go home and fall asleep. It's going to take me a couple hours. And so it's taken me years to get some of my people closest to me in my life to understand, like, look, I'm just not going to be up. I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which you talk about that in the book. We'll get to that eventually. But like, you need to take care of yourself, but you can't just get off work and go right to sleep. It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible with the high energy job we have.
And I also think that sometimes we make the wrong comparison. We ask ourselves, like, would we rather go out or would we rather not go out? And that's the question we ask ourselves. And so of course, the answer is we would rather go out. But if you reframe that question as, would I rather not go out and get a little financial security, set myself up with, some emergency savings and go on vacation? Or would I rather go out? When you ask different questions, you get different answers.
I think the evolution of asking yourself the right question is something that you're going to give people a little bit of a cliff note on if they get your book, because I came to the realization at some point, because instead of framing it like, oh, am I going to go out and have fun, or am I not going to go out and have fun? Now it's like, am I going to go out after work, or am I going to go to Red Rocks to see Humphreys McGee this summer, or any other option except it's only black and white. It's only go out or not go out. It's like, no, this is, or do I want to buy a new microphone for this project that I'm working on? But you've really captured within this book so many of the thoughts that people would hopefully naturally end up coming to organically, but you're giving them a little more of a roadmap. And if they get this book early enough, they can start to realize those things and take a few of those smaller steps. And as you mentioned in the book, some of those smaller steps, one, reframing the question, two, reframing how you decide what money goes where with the, because I found myself doing this on my own. I'll be like, I'm paying all my credit cards with my Thursday shifts. I'm paying my rent with these sort of thing, setting small goals like that. Is that something that you've explored outside of just that sort of small thing?
Yeah, as you know, the budgeting chapter in this book is massive. It's the biggest chapter in the book. And there's a lot of different ways that you can budget when you're on a fluctuating income. And I love that approach where you're like, these are my money making shifts. And so these are my heavy hitters where that's going towards like rent, car payment, insurance. And these are sort of my, we don't know what's going to happen. So they go into like either my savings or my fun money or, my going out bucket, whatever it is. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I love that because especially when if you get through the book and you talk about like building up an emergency savings, which I'll say my number one tip for people in the service industry, especially right now in this current climate, is to build an emergency savings bucket. It's my favorite financial tool. One, we're in the industry where we deal with the general public. As we discussed, they can chip away at our confidence. They can make ridiculous asks. And having a bucket of money gives you the ability to say no a lot more, right? When you know that you have 6 months of savings, 3 months of savings, you know that, okay, you know what, this job is starting to burn me out. If I don't take a few days off, then I'm going to just end up walking out, or I'm going to snap on someone and I'm not going to have a job. And then I'm going to have to go look for another one. And so I love this emergency savings system for people in the industry more because it gives there's a power dynamic at play in this industry.
Yes.
And when you have some financial foundation, financial footing, it puts the power back into your hands. balance in a
Okay,
lot
so
of
you're living
situations.
shift to shift.
Yeah.
You know, I have to make this today to survive today. So you have to.
Yeah.
You're enslaved basically to have to do that.
So in that power idea, in that vein, you mentioned something in the book, and say you're a valet to show to your customers or your clients that you're going the extra mile. You sweep the seat out when you get out, you know, when you pop out of the car. Now there is a power dynamic between who, and I want to ask you this, because I have to sort of profile people that I do certain things for in the service industry, because there's two ways that they can view you giving the extra bit of love, care, or attention to them. One, they appreciate it and they're like, hey, look, I'm building a relationship with this person. They care about me. They're making my time here as fun as possible. And then the other side is, oh, they've done something extra for me. Now I have a bit of power over them or ownership over them, and they can use that. During the hustle period, how would you particularly differentiate the type A person from the type B person, the one who would take advantage of you or the one who would appreciate it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on what kind of job you're in specifically. It's sort of, location dependent. If you're in a volume-based business where you're churning those things, you might not have the time to give that extra bit of service. Whereas if you are in somewhere that's more like high craft or even in a dive bar where connection is way more important,
Yep.
then I think your dynamics are going to be different in those settings.
How many of those dynamics have you experienced personally that sort of drove you to those conclusions?
I have worked from high-end fine dining down to dive bars. And what's interesting, I think, is that they all take a really different set of mastery, right? Like you never appreciate your interpersonal skills so much as when you're in a dive bar. Basically everyone who walks in is the comment section of a Facebook post. You are dealing with so many different personalities, so much crazy stuff coming at you, and you just have to be on your game. Whereas if you're in fine dining, you're not coming across that, right? And so your points of service, your mastery in those ways it's totally different.
Because I'm almost exclusively been in upscale dining.
And I've exclusively been dive bar, so that's our
dynamic. But like I just come from my job I just left. I had this giant pepper grinder. It's like 3 feet tall, and when I would bring it over, I would like have it at my side and make a little joke out of it and have fun. And most people appreciate that kind of performance. But part of why I left that job is because I was having to perform more for less people and then less money. And my boss at the time's thing was, "Well, just schmooze more." Like, well, you can only schmooze so much out of some people. And if you have 15 customers a night, hopefully 2 of them will tip you a little extra, but it's not, you need the balance of volume and schmoozability. But like I had a review a couple weeks ago that said I was overperforming, and it would be good for some people, but not for them. I'm like, I get that.
But see, sometimes it's in bad taste to over schmooze or over.
Exactly. Some people just want to be left alone.
And I'm one of those sometimes, I'm a different guy on different days, man, potato, but there is sort of a middle ground to be learned. And like you were saying, it gives you so many of the different facets of really just personality management with the people that you're working with. So the company you own now, the construction company, when you were hired on, all these sort of ideas started formulating. So what took you from employee to ownership? What steps did you take?
I mean, what's interesting is I think that I'm pretty ordinary. I've had a lot of unique experiences, but I think that all of the things that, my now business partner saw in me were things and skills that I acquired while in the service industry, right? Those strange situations, those unique conversations, your ability to manage the front, middle, and end of a transaction, you get a lot of skills in this industry. And I think that's another side of when we were talking about our guests and the general public chipping at our confidence. We just don't realize how skilled we actually are. You are an entrepreneur in this industry, right? And so seeing that through somebody else's eyes, it was impactful for me, right? To see that they were like, oh, all of these skills that you have can translate to this industry and probably any other industry as well.
It was a bit of validation, I'm sure, and some sort of show of appreciation, and any sort of feedback like that can drive the hustler inside of you to become something and be something just with the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that hustle too is also really important. Hustle gets a really bad rap right now in the current zeitgeist. It's, but our hustle is very different. Our hustle is self-defined. Our hustle is us in a situation, scanning the environment and looking for ways to carve out additional, ways to optimize during a shift. And that's very different than in the 9 to 5 world where hustle might be considered working for free, or you're in a salaried position but expected to work 80 hours or something. And so I think for us, we get that leg up where our hustle is our own and we know how to utilize it more. And so
sharper hustle too.
Exactly.
It's being honed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's in a finite amount of time where we have this much time to make money, and then after that it's over. You're open for 4 hours. You can hustle before and after, but that middle 4 hours is crunch time.
Exactly. And so like when we were talking about segmenting maybe your shifts as a strategy for budgeting or savings, and you're talking about like you have this new goal, right? You read my book, you have this new goal of, I'm going to get this 3 to 6 months emergency savings because it's a layer of protection that I need and that's really going to serve me in life. And so you decide that your Tuesday shift is going to be your emergency savings shift, and everything you make on that shift is going to be this bucket of money that will protect you.
Fuck you, money.
You are going to hustle your ass off on Tuesday because you are like, this is sort of my fuck you money.
Yeah.
This is my, in case I don't want to hustle here one day next week money.
And you said it in the book too, as well, because if you did have that little bit, that bucket where you could say, you know what, I can take the next 2 or 3 days off and I'll work through this and maybe I won't walk out on that job. But you would have typically if you didn't have those emergency funds and you just got fed up.
The average American who works a 9 to 5 has 20 paid days off. Can you imagine how much happier, healthier, and adjusted service industry people would be if we had 20 paid days off a year?
I read that in the book. I was like, nah, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, like, you can't take a mental health day. You can't be like, look, it's a bad day for me to come in. But one, I guess, good thing that came out of the pandemic is it's a little easier to call off of work now in that kind of regard. Like, look, I'm not feeling good, but then you have to just lie and be like, I think I might have COVID to get a day off. And you don't want to have to lie. You want to be able to tell the truth. Like, look, it's been a shit week. I'm on my 5th day in a row and I just can't today.
Because I think that lie contributes to back to the self-deprecating thing, you telling people you were going to teach, even though it's just an innocent lie just to get them to shut the fuck up because you don't want to hear about it right then. I think that does add on and pile on to your own mental stability. Even though you don't mean it, it still seeps in there somehow.
Yeah, I think the pandemic did a bunch of things to the industry. And one, I think I appreciate that it's made it an employee market right now. I remember coming to New York and looking for jobs, and people, I would come to like a nice club or a nice restaurant and people say, oh, you don't have New York experience, so you're not going to get a job here. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I have Los Angeles experience. I know how to deal with attitude. I have Vegas experience. So I know how to hustle. I have Detroit experience. I know how to not take shit. Like I have all of this experience. And they were like, no, sorry, you don't have New York experience. You're not going to work here. And I think what happened with COVID is like, we are seeing a lot of change in the industry. Bad actors are getting kind of pushed out. And also it's just become such an employee market right now.
Especially for the back of the house. It has tremendously helped the back of the house have a lot more pull and say, and that's what negatively affected my previous job because it was giving them too much power, and then they would abuse that power as a group and hold us hostage. And we went from being the pride of the restaurant to being the dregs of the restaurant because they wanted to just make sure they had people that are just showing up for work every day, even though some people were getting away with half-assing their job now in the back of the house. And something you kind of mentioned in the book that I want to kind of lead into that was like lending people money that you work with or to associate with is dangerous. And I make a habit of being like, no, sorry, I just don't do it. Because if you lend somebody $5, $10, then you got to beg to get it back. And then when you're begging to get it back, you're pissing them off. And then now you've created a barrier between the two of you that you didn't have to do if you'd not loaned the money at all.
Yeah. If you aren't somebody who's on track with retirement and savings, then you have no business loaning anyone money. You have to, it's the whole put your oxygen mask on yourself first. Right. I like that.
Yeah. But it makes sense because you can't just give away. I mean, and I've always thought, if you loan money, you'd be able to not have to get it back. That's it. And some people will loan people money with the idea that they don't ever have to do it to them again and let them keep it just to be like, haha, you can't ask me for money again, cousin Jeff.
Or if you don't ever want to see him again, like Bronx Tale, he's like, hey, that guy owes me money. He goes, how much do you owe you? $20. Do you like him? No. Well, good. $20. You got off easy. You never got to see him again.
I think for a lot of us, there's a good chunk in one chapter that I spend talking about boundaries and how this industry is kind of terrible with boundaries. And I think some of that just comes with us needing to have clear lines of how to say something, right? So when someone comes to you and they say, oh, hey, can I get $20 from you and I'll give it back to you next shift. We're not prepared. We don't have the language for how to respond. But I think sometimes if we think about boundaries that we can put in place, whether we set up rules before it's always easier when you set it up before. So if you are prepping yourself for somebody to borrow money from you and you're like, all right, I just have a policy. I create the policy that I don't loan money to anyone. Then that policy is in place. And you're like, actually, I can't, I can't, I'm not in the place right now where I can loan money,
And you don't even have to elicit to them that you've made it a policy you don't have to use those terms. It's just make yourself know that you have that policy and then function accordingly. Say, no, I don't do that. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Or when you're going into a new restaurant and you're like, all right, so here's the rules for myself. I deal with the general public. The general public, as we know, is terrible. So I don't give my address out. I don't talk about the street that I live on. I don't show pictures of my kids if I have kids, or setting up those boundaries is an important part of surviving long-term in this industry, because people will continuously take. And another reason I love the concept behind this book is because I'm like, oh my God, if somebody told me at the age of 19 that I could stay in this industry for the rest of my life and if I made all these decisions, I could retire in 20 years and have the life of my dreams in the career that I loved, I would have jumped on that. And I think that it's so possible for our industry if we put the right mental frameworks and the right structuring of our money and our benefits in place. And
you've given people the playbook already. You've given the cliff notes. And me seeing this at 41 years old, I was like, some of these conclusions are things that I've come to, but like you said, if I'd have seen it at 28 or 19. So that's why I'm so happy you got in contact with us, because this is giving people the opportunity to figure it out earlier than the rest of us.
Yeah. One of the basic things you tell people that I've been doing for years, spreadsheet, keep track of your money. And I use that in various ways. Like at my last job, I could know this day last year, what did I make? So what can I expect to make this day? Hopefully, if business is continuing at the same path it has, and the pandemic kind of messed that up, because we're most of us are seasonal, basically. He's busy when I'm slow, and I'm slow when he's busy, and January is just slow for everybody in this town. But I plan ahead based on that, so I would look at my spreadsheet and go, I'm going to make this next year, this time. And that's part of why I just left my job, because I was noticing the constant decline day to day, shift to shift, no matter what. Even when there's big events in town that are normally lucrative, it wasn't happening anymore. And I was like, I have to make a personal decision that, even though it hurts, I was telling him this, and it kind of felt like breaking up with a girlfriend when I knew I was going to leave the job. It kind of just you keep dating somebody even because you're part of the routine. And I did it for months when I should have left months ago for my mental well-being. But it was almost emotional knowing that I was going to do it. But then something else terrible happened 10 minutes later. And I was like, fuck this. I'm making the right choice for me. And I don't have to let my nostalgic relationship with this place, affect me staying here for a longer period of time than I needed to. And it was hard, but now I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, nice. Fresh new stuff.
But that's what's great about this industry, is that there's always a fresh start on the other side of another establishment. I love spreadsheets too. I'm so glad you brought up income, because I think one of the things that our industry is so good at talking about how much we made on a shift. We're great at it. We're like, we talk with our coworker friends about how well we did on a shift, but that's not a metric that you can use for your overall financial health. And we're so good at talking about that, but we totally neglect the other side, which is money management, investing, and retirement planning. And so my hope is that we can all start having those types of conversations. And I love starting with the income side of tracking. Tracking your income is so, so important, because until you know how much you make, you don't know how much power you have. For a lot of people that I know in the industry, they don't track their income. So they go to H&R Block, they show up at TurboTax, and they're like, I don't know, how much do you think I made? Or they shoot a dart at the board, and they're like, I'm going to just claim this amount.
Wow.
And it's dangerous for so many reasons. One, majority of retired service industry workers rely solely on Social Security.
Which is
Solely, completely.
especially if you made a lot of cash and didn't claim it, you're not getting shit.
You're
I mean, I've
not
been paying
getting
it for years,
anything.
but like, yeah, if you he gets almost exclusively cash. So if you have more freedom to not claim something, but then later on it gets you on the back end.
So this is us slowly stepping out of that, no back end business to try and, doing the podcast and things like that, just having projects to, concentrate your creativity on, and something that's fulfilling in terms of not a means to an end. Even though I don't look at my job as a must or I have to do it, there's so much freedom there that I do enjoy, and I earn a living, but my take home, I don't have a real metric for it. And it's hard to sort of wrap my head around that until I get about halfway through this book,
And
and
so
just setting different expectations for yourself.
yeah, and so income is super important because income sets a lot of amounts for things. Your income sets how much Social Security you stand to receive. And when you realize that people who are in this industry rely solely on that, I think in 2020, the average Social Security check for people who were claiming their income in full was $20,000. If you can't imagine living on $20,000 and you aren't claiming your income in full, then you're going to be very, very surprised when it comes to retirement time that you're not going to have enough to live on.
That's what Clint spends on wine every year.
That's one of those industry perks where you get wine at cost.
So just to kind of put a button on this thing, if our people in the service industry, if they decide it's time to start taking a little more ownership over their financial situation, what's a few small steps right in the beginning something they could accomplish early that would reward them? Because it's hard to start something that you don't see an end to. So smaller chunks of things that, get up, make your bed. You've done something that day. Is there anything, any tips you have for someone just trying to accomplish something financially in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, my first tip was that emergency fund. I really think that is like the first financial pillar that everyone needs in this industry. You need a bucket of some savings that you have access to.
A fuck
bucket. Fuck you money. I also refer to it as fuck up money, like it's almost like your self-insurance in this industry. So once that's in place, then my next step for people to take is to start investing for their retirement. For people who work at places that's a W-2, you may get like a $12 check because of whatever your federal minimum wages or whatever. If you're somebody who gets that W-2, you can open up an IRA, which is an independent, it's a retirement account. So IRA stands for individual retirement account. And you can invest in a traditional or a Roth IRA. And then if you fill up that, which has income limits and I think this year it's like $6,000. But once you fill that up, you can also move on to what's called a brokerage account. If you're somebody who is 1099 independent contractor working in the service industry, which a lot of our peers are, I love people who work 1099. I think a lot of people don't realize the power that they have in that. But if you can set yourself up as a business, you can deduct a lot of expenses that way. So I think if you are somebody who's in an establishment where your employer has you as an independent contractor, please reach out to me if you're not aware of the power of that. But then you would go to a solo 401k. And then once you would fill up the solo 401k, which has a lot more room in it, then you would move on to a brokerage account. Investing is super important because of compound interest.
Yeah. I mean, I've been investing for about eight years now. And then when my mother passed 4.5 years ago, she left us some money, and then I got even more into investing. And then during the pandemic, I had nothing but time. So I got further into it, but it's a comfortable feeling. Even though I'm not keeping all my money to spend, it's nice knowing I'm preparing for the future, so I can
bucket.
Yeah, so my feet don't hurt every day.
So and all of this can be yours explained in this book. I really enjoyed the first cursory read through. I went through it. It made me feel a little bashful about how I've conducted myself so far, but it's so very enlightening. And Are you on? Can you get the books on Amazon or?
Yep. You can find it on Amazon. Just search Tipped.
And we'll put a graphic up on the screen for all of our people, and we'll put links in the description on all of our posts here. And what are your socials so that people can find you?
Yeah, I mostly hang out on Instagram at Tipped Finance on all the socials. I've created like 5 or 6 TikToks, but
Oh, right.
That's like I do our social media for the most part, and like he's like, oh, we want to TikTok. I'm like, have at it. I'm not doing. We have like a Twitter account that doesn't do anything, but it's kind of an ongoing joke.
I'm just a content guy, you know. I
Instagram.
just make stuff.
Yeah.
You post it, baby.
Yeah.
Come on.
And it works good. And that's Instagram is probably 85% of our social media stuff because it's just easier to interact that way. They don't throttle the shit out of you like Facebook does.
So yeah, please pick up the book Tipped by Barbara Sloan. And like you said, if they want any particular advice, hit you up on @tipfinance on Instagram. And
I offer one-on-one coaching too. You can go to my website, www.tipfinance.com. I do one-on-one coaching. I will also come to your establishment and give money talks. If you own a restaurant, bar, club, if you own Uber, I will come and give you a talk.
Oh, this is fantastic.
That is awesome.
I didn't even know that. We'll probably use some of that just for the podcast thing.
Yeah.
Get the 1099 info going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. This was a great interview. And
Yeah, this went so well. I'm so happy that
and I hope our listeners, if a quarter of them take some of this to heart, that'd be great. Because we know some people that definitely could use this advice, and I hope they are open to it.
Well, I think this is a good primer for what is within the book. But once it's like a snowball in this book. Once you start rolling, it's hard to put it down, and especially because each new paragraph, there's something where you're like, oh, I have definitely felt that before.
And you do such a good job of relating to everyone, the variety of struggles and issues we've all dealt with. And so it's not just pounding you with financial advice. It's giving you reasons why you need to do this.
And it's inspiring that someone could create something so amazing right here. So thoughtful and informative, and to make it, and not playing down to anyone. You're not pointing the finger.
I think it's really approachable too. Like the investing chapter is one of my favorite chapters because it's an entire analogy to the bar. If you understand what it's like to work or be at a bar, you will understand investing by the time you're done with this chapter.
Oh, that's
amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully we'll get to speak again because we'll get feedback from this, and maybe we'll get another session going with some of our listener posed questions, and then we can really interact with the community.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I love that. Thank you guys so much.
We are so glad to have you. All right, that was Barbara Sloan, Tipped Finance. We're going to leave all the links wherever we can to grab her book.
Okay.
We had a couple of F's in there, but who's counting? Not me.
Not me.
Thank you to our patrons. We'll do a Patreon next week probably. We just got a lot to do this week.
There'll be some secret stuff that probably happens tomorrow. We can talk about.
I like that. Yeah. So if you want to hear all about, we'll talk about the Christmas party a little bit on the regular podcast, but most of the juice
will be on the
Patreon. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Yes,
we appreciate the patrons. Go follow Barbara on Instagram at Tipped Finance. Follow us. And if you would, it's free to do. Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Please.
From Behind the Barcast. It really helps us out. And if you leave a comment, that puts us in the algorithm and it boosts our stuff. And watch our shorts. All of those things help.
Thank you guys.
That's it from Paxton Quigley and Clint Moses. We're out.